want to start today with a l'chaim, because on the Chabad calendar, it's a unique day. They're always unique, right? But today especially. Today is the 13th of Tammuz. Yesterday was the 12th of Tammuz. And these mark 92 years since the liberation of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he lived in Russia under the communist government, and they were cracking down on religion and religious institutions. A lot of rabbis, and most communities were really closing up shop, schools closing down, and he was the one that remained strong and said, we're not giving in to the communists. And he actually founded a network of hundreds and hundreds of schools, mikvahs, all underground across Russia. Incredibly organized, and he had sent his shluchim, his chassidim, to be messengers from town to town, and they restarted the day schools, open mikvahs, and eventually the noose of the communists closed in around him, and in 1927 he was arrested with a death sentence hanging over his head. He made a resolution, went into prison, that I am not giving in. I refuse to be intimidated by the Soviets. Many of them were Jewish, the guards and the officers that were interrogating him. Some of them even children or grandchildren of Hasidim from the Chabad community who had become communists. And he said, I'm not showing any respect, any ounce of recognition to these people. And he was willing to pay for it. And he did. He suffered a lot. Injuries that had him impaired for the rest of his life. He was thrown down a metal staircase, hit, beaten. But he refused to show them any ounce of respect. There was a lot of pressure from here. American Jews rallied to save him. Even got high officials, president, to intercede in Moscow, and eventually his sentence was lessened to 3 years hard labor in the town of Kostroma, some sort of labor camp there. But miraculously, 9 days later, his sentence was commuted altogether. And on the 12th of Tammuz, he was told, you're allowed to go free. The problem was, it was a Tuesday. Under Soviet rule then, the week went from Wednesday to Tuesday. Tuesday was the weekend. So the offices were all closed on Tuesday, so they couldn't sign his release papers. He had to wait one more day till Wednesday until he went free, the 13th of Tammuz, which was today. And it's ever since then been celebrated in Chabad circles and beyond as an amazing victory, a day where he left and his Hasidim were emboldened to continue his work, even though he had to leave Russia very shortly afterwards. But his network continued there, and he eventually came here to America in 1940, where he lived for 10 years, until 1950 he passed away, and 1951 the Rebbe, his son-in-law, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, took over the helm of Chabad and expanded his network to here in America and across the world. So today, when we remember his liberation, and we're going to see tonight the message that it holds for every one of us. L'chaim. So we always like starting with the parsha and bouncing over that. This week is a fascinating Torah portion. Balak. And it tells the story of the Moabite king Balak, who was afraid of the Jews, knew that God's on their side, and so he hires a prophet named Bilaam, a non-Jewish prophet, and he said, I want you to come help me to curse the Jews. Originally, God told Bilaam, you can't go. Finally, he gives him permission, but you only got to be able to say what I tell you to say. Okay. And he goes and he attempts to curse the Jews, but every time he opens his mouth, standing on a mountaintop looking over the Jewish nation to curse them, blessings flow forth. And Balak is infuriated. They bring sacrifices, move somewhere else, try again. Again, blessings. And some of the deepest, most profound blessings and prophecies about the Jewish people came from this episode of Balaam. The prophecies of Mashiach that we have in Torah are Balaam's prophecies, Bilaam's prophecies. The beautiful passage we say every morning, beginning of davening, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkanosecha Yisrael. How great are your tents and encampments, Jewish people. So some of the most beautiful lines and deepest, profound prophecies were from Bilaam when he attempted to curse the Jewish people. Finally, he turns to Balak, defeated. He says, I'm a man of God. I'm a prophet. I can only say I'm a mouthpiece. And so if God puts words of blessing in my mouth, that's all I can do. But this is a Talmud adds in this little part of the story. Bilaam tells Balak, I do have one piece of advice, how we can get these Jews. If we undermine their spiritual protection, if we're able to seduce them away from God, they will lose their divine protection, and that way we can get them. How are we going to do that? And so, they get the Midianite women to seduce the Jewish men. And many Jewish men were seduced by these women, which started a plague. God sent down, a sort of punishment on the camp. 24,000 Jews died. Until, famously, Pinchas saw one of the Jewish priests, the Nasi, the head of the tribe, one of the top echelons of leadership in the Jewish, was being intimate, having a relationship with a Midianite woman right in the middle of the camp. A brazen act. And Pinchas took a spear and killed them. And that appeased God. And next week's portion speaks how Pinchas was rewarded for this act. The Talmud, and the Torah says this, and the Talmud fills in the gaps, says the Midianite women, when they seduced them, their real intent wasn't just to seduce them sexually, to lower down their God. They actually wanted to get them to do idol worship. And one of the popular idols in Moab then was called Baal Peor. Peor had a very interesting form of worship. That was, they would defecate, relieve themselves in front of this idol. That was the way they served this idol. And so, what they would do, Talmud says, the women would seduce the men, right in their height of their arousal, say, we can't continue until you perform this ritual in the Baal Peor. And the men would be so enwrapped with these women that they would do everything, that women would do anything they wanted. And that way, they got the Jews to be veered off the path of God in order to have some sort of power over them. That's the portion this week. Now, what I want to discuss tonight, the topic is called, What Do You Worship? And I want to discuss the interface, the connection between these two episodes. Bilaam prophesying the deepest prophecies about the Mashiach, the end of days, and how the Jews will have a Darach Kochav Miyakov, a star will shoot forth from Jacob, the leader of Mashiach. And then right afterwards, the Jews fall prey to this ploy and worship this Peor, which sounds like the most strange worship in the world. And that's going to be our next question. What was this worship all about? We, in general today, don't really appreciate paganism, idolatry. The world's a different world. We can't make sense of it. But once upon a time, it wasn't just popular, it was almost ubiquitous, it was universal. And they were people, intelligent people, learned people, people who thought about life, that swore by these pagan idolatries. The Talmud tells that we don't even begin to appreciate the drive, desire they had for these idolatries. It's lost in the world, thankfully. Talmud tells a story of one of the Talmudic rabbis once said a negative remark, a disparaging comment about King Menashe. He was a Jewish king who fell to idolatry, to idol worshiper. And he, said a remark about him. And Menashe came to him in a dream and said, "You have no idea what sort of drive there was then for Avodah Zarah, for idol worship. What sort of allure there was. You can't even imagine. If you would be there," he told this rabbi in a dream, "you would be running as quick as you can to serve his idols." And so we can't, it's hard to really make sense of it. But this seems to be taken a little bit far. What's going on? Why would they defecate, relieve themselves in front of this idol? So I want to share two ideas. One's a very practical one, which has a beautiful message on its own. The other is a little deeper, a Hasidic teaching, which may or may not have been what the original worshippers had in mind, but at least we can look back and appreciate some sort of depth, spiritual depth to this service. First idea is very practical. The original worshippers of Peor, Baal Peor, had a very deep spiritual worship, were wrapped up in ecstasy during their worship of Peor. They, for hours and hours on end, in a meditative trance, and to the point where they lost awareness and control of their senses and of their bodily functions. And by nature of doing so, since there were hours and hours in this trance, their bodies would relieve themselves without them even realizing. They were sort of in another world, in another spiritual zone, experiencing reality that was transcendent. And it happened to be that these people would also defecate because they were just totally in no control of their bodies. Like a child who isn't toilet trained in the middle of the night, just makes them in a diaper, right? That's what would happen. Now what happened is, the next generation, it's very hard to give over such deep spiritual messages to the next generation. And often what happens is, the younger observe the older and take the external trappings. That's what they see. Right? They see the externalities, they see the behaviors. And what eventually became is they thought, oh, you know how we serve this idol? You know how our parents did? And they were the real spiritual giants? They used to defecate in front of this idol. That's what we saw with our own eyes. And that became, slowly evolved to become the practice. And if you think about it, this is something which we often do to a degree. There's something deep, there's some beautiful practice or beautiful idea that people live by, and we often take the externalities of it and say, well, these people that I look up to do A, B, and C, I'm also going to do A, B, and C. Not realizing that A, B, and C was not what was good about their behavior. It was just symptoms or outgrowths of what they were doing. But we grab onto the external ideas and miss the whole internal truth behind it. So that's one practical idea of why Baal Peor was serviced in this way. The second idea I want to preface with the story. This is the story of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was known as the Rayatz, which is an acronym for Yosef Yitzchak, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, which is his name. So the Rayatz, during his imprisonment, at one point he refused to say information about all his people working for him, because that would mean they'd get arrested as well. The Soviet officer shows him his gun and says, this little toy has caused many people to talk. If you think you're so strong, look what I have here on my table. Remaining calm, the Rayatz, the previous Rebbe, told him, this little toy makes people talk, people who have one world and multiple gods. I have one God and multiple worlds. Doesn't scare me. Now, the audacity that he had in the face of this guard, who could have easily, on the spot, shot him, right? That in itself, the strength and courage, is incredible. But what did he mean? Let's analyze his line for a minute. What did he mean, multiple gods, one world? What's going on? Simply, I believe in God, therefore you can't scare me. But he seems to be saying something a little bit more. We'll start off with the multiple gods. What does it mean to worship multiple gods? What's the difference in serving multiple gods versus serving one God? Is it a number game? 1 versus 2? What really lies at the crux of monotheism? And what separates it from paganism or polytheism?
One God, God versus many gods.
Okay, so is it the same difference as 2 gods versus many? I mean, if I believe in 2 gods, you believe in 10 gods, and someone believes in 1, we all believe in 1 God. Let's say person A, call him John, believes in 10 gods. Person B, we'll call him Bill, believes in 2 gods. And then you have Adam, believes in 1 God. Is the difference between Bill and Adam the same difference as John and Bill? 1, 2, 10. Just reduction. 10 becomes 2, 2 becomes 1. Is that the same difference? I don't think so. The difference between 2 to 1 is infinitely greater than 10 to 2. Because it's not just a reduction to 1, it's a radically different understanding of God. And by extension, understanding of the world and ourselves. A belief system of multiple gods basically says that every force that I encounter in nature is or has a God, right? So the sun was worshipped because its power it gives light, it gives warmth and heat, growth, right? The sun is such a powerful force and energy in the world that people worshipped it as a god. There were gods of love and gods of peace. These were considered very beautiful ideals, and therefore there's a God that governs that area of life. So really, those gods are being built from what we appreciate, the forces that we appreciate that govern the world. So we're building a God, or creating a God to govern, or that we think governs that area or aspect of life. We're worshipping something that's beneficial for us. A system of one God says that God is transcendent to any specific thing. Because if it's this thing, it can't be that thing. Your sun god can't be controlling the moon, right? Or whatever it is. So if it's a one God, it means it's not a God of anything. It's not a distinct force. It's something that transcends the world. It's beyond, before the world. And all the worlds are resulted from Him, from it. Infinite, exactly. And what it also means is that there's an order to the universe. As soon as I believe in multiple gods, there's competing forces in the very elementary level of existence. And so I can't say there's an organized existence, because there's competing forces. And the gods are having wars with each other, and they're, competitive. And so if there's multiple forces of nature, each one promoting their own force, no one's to know what's going to happen tomorrow. There's chaos. It's chaos. There's no order. There's no plan. One God, the belief in one God tells me that there's a source. Everything that exists is part of one unified creation, and by extension, one unified purpose of existence. And the whole of history and the whole future is all part of the design of one God. And so there's some sort of plan, there's a purpose and providence. Everything that happens is supposed to happen, happens for a reason. The Hasidic texts say that even a blade of grass blowing in the wind, if it's blowing, that means it has to blow for some reason. Really? Does it make any cosmic difference if the blade of grass blew in the wind? Apparently. The biggest proof is that it happened. So the belief in one God, the belief system in one God, is an incredibly different system. And when we proclaim Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, we declare our faith. The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. If you think about the implications of this, it's not just, I'm a monotheist, put my hand in the air, pick me. It's not that there's one God because, I don't want to believe in a bunch of them. What we're really declaring is not only one God, not many, there's a oneness in the world. We are giving ourselves over, we are submitting ourselves to a higher plan, to the creator of everything, that encompasses everything and everybody and every experience. And so when we say Hashem Echad, God is one, we're not just saying, I believe in one God, a number one. We are declaring our faith in a vision for the world that is a unified world, a unified reality. That beneath all the chaos we see going on in the world, there's some sort of order, there's some sort of pattern, there's some sort of divine plan. And we are the executors of this plan. So when we say Hashem Echad, not only are we saying, we're empowering ourselves that we're part of this unified existence, part of this unified entity of reality, oneness, but also we're holding ourselves responsible. Hashem Elokeinu, God is our God. He's empowering us to be responsible, to be the executors of this vision. If I could sum up a little differently, if you have multiple gods, you only have one world. What that means is, when you believe in multiple gods, then all you're looking for is your own benefit. Right? And multiple gods doesn't have to be some far-off pagan thing. Right? Let's think of God as anything that I can use to end a conversation. What I mean by that is, if I say, why are you taking that job? It's going to cause you to be so busy, have no time for your family and friends. It's crazy. And you say, well, it makes a lot of money. And that ends the conversation, right? I can't argue further. Money, you said, then, is the highest on your hierarchy. That's become a God for you. I'm sacrificing everything else in my life for money. Often happiness becomes a God. Right? Everything's okay in the name of happiness. You can't argue with me, this makes me happy. This makes me happy. So what I'm saying is everything can be sacrificed. Everything can be pushed aside, even moral value sometimes, for the sake of happiness. Happiness then is my God. I'm worshiping it. Right? And that's a modern day sort of evolution of the pagan idea. I worship a God of love, or a God of might, of strength. What I'm basically saying is these are the highest hierarchy. I'm creating a God out of it that I'm worshiping to give me that power. I'm able to tap into this resource of that God. So all I believe in is myself. All I care about is my own existence. what makes me fulfilled, what gives me money, what makes me happy, what gives me strength, what makes me have love. So essentially, all I care about is me. So when I have multiple gods, I only have one world. My existence in the here and now, in the material world, that's all that matters to me. If I lose that, I have nothing. If you're living a life just searching for happiness, just searching for money, just searching for recognition, whatever you're searching for, if you lose that, you're left with zero. There's nothing lasting, nothing real about life. Right? That's what the previous Rebbe said. People who have multiple gods and one world feel threatened by your gun. Because if you shoot them, if they die, life is over. I can't enjoy myself anymore. I can't execute all those plans I had. I can't be an achiever anymore. What have I left behind? Nothing. My existence ceased to be. But if I believe in one God, then the ultimate reason I'm here is not for my own pleasure, not for my own enjoyment or success, but somehow to make the world a better place, to bring the world closer, further along on its mission. There's the material world, the existence which we experience in our senses, but then there's Olam Haba. It doesn't just mean the world to come when we die. It means in the present reality, there's spiritual reality happening right in front of us. A parallel universe exists, just not another universe the same way we know this one to be. There's a spiritual reality. Every time I think something, I move my hand, it's having cosmic effect on a spiritual level. Every good deed I do is affecting the spiritual existence of this world. We don't experience it, we don't recognize it always, but it's there. I know it's there because I believe in one God. And therefore I know there's a purpose to why I'm here. I know there's a purpose to all of reality. I know that we're on a trajectory, and through my life, through my efforts, I'm moving that trajectory along towards a more perfected world, towards a more divine world, a redeemed world. And so Judaism sees the whole of history as a sort of a train heading toward the destination of the Messianic era, which means Messianic era equals, translates as, a perfected, redeemed world. Right? A world where people recognize their Creator, and by virtue of that are kind, respectful. There's no war, no competition. Everyone's there just to advance the world good. There's no poverty. There's no jealousy. There's a world where we all live, bask in God's glory. We all experience the divine. The veneer is stripped back and we see the truth of existence. That's a Messianic era. And every person that lives, every day that we live, is another opportunity to move that ball along. And it's been rolling along for thousands of years, and we're hopefully near the finish line. Maimonides writes something fascinating. He says, every person has to envision the world at every moment as a balanced scale. You have to imagine that the olden day scales with two sides. You have to imagine that the world is perfectly balanced in good and bad, and your little bit of good you do will tip the scales. That's why you need to live constantly. Every moment, I have an opportunity now to tip the scales. So we're constantly looking to do one extra good thing, one extra mitzvah. And the Rebbe would repeat this quote from Maimonides over and again, and it's one of the inspirations behind his mitzvah campaigns, behind his sending his emissary shluchim around to spread Judaism. One extra mitzvah. And originally he was ridiculed. Why are you getting a guy stopping someone on the street to put on tefillin? He has no idea what he's doing. Doesn't appreciate the mitzvahs. Or maybe only doing it to help this little young Chabad guy out. They shouldn't feel, they do nothing. Useless. Or out of guilt from his parents, whatever it is. And he's going to move on and keep going. What's the point of it? So besides the fact that there are many people, that it has led to long-term effects that one encounters, But even beyond that, the Rebbe said, one mitzvah is infinitely worthwhile. And what he says, this may be the act that will tip the scales. And so that's the way we have to envision the world. And we're on this trajectory. It gives incredible purpose and meaning to every moment of life. And so the previous Rebbe tells us, stares the gun in the face, and tells his would-be potential attacker, tells his Soviet guard, he says, I believe in one God, and therefore I have multiple worlds. Kill me. Obviously, they don't want to die, right? But his point is, okay, if I'm meant to die, I'm meant to die. My work lives on. What I've achieved in my life till here is a powerful, potent force in the world. You can't scare me with a gun. Besides the fact that God runs the world. So, his one-liner to the Soviet guy, which the guy may or may not have understood the depth, was really summing up the entire contribution of Judaism, and especially as channeled through Hasidic thought, to the human experience. It's a radical shift from experiencing the world as an egocentric model that it starts with me, and it's all about me, right?
And ends with me.
And ends with me. And therefore, whatever I can grab, and by virtue I'm going to worship those things that make me feel good. And therefore, if it ends with me, it ends, right? Or it's a divine-centric model of existence, and I am grateful to have opportunity to be part of this mission, part of this historic undertaking of humanity to bring the world into perfection. Let's go back to Baal Peor. In Hasidic thought, it says something very, very interesting. It says, God created a world. God is infinite. And there had to be channels with which he channeled his energy, the creative energy, in order to create a finite world that we know, a material world. And just like, imagine the world, the process of creation, as a digestive system. Right? That is, our body takes in an incredible amount of stuff, food, and it has to sift through it what nutrients it can utilize and send those nutrients to different parts of the body, to the blood, and the rest get rid of, right? So, the same way, that sort of funnel is this infinite divine energy that has to be funneled through channels that it can become a creative force that can create reality as we know it. And within this world, we have that creative energy, the divine energy. And the way Hasidic text describes is, and then we have the waste, the excrement, and that's all the material pleasures, right? And we go through this world, our natural state as human beings is we appreciate the material delights of the world. We're driven, we have these desires and wants for all pleasures. It can be very base pleasures, good food, sexual activity. They can be more sublime pleasures, music, ideas that make us happy, but they're all part of the material world. The ultimate pleasure is we experience God within the world. And so that divine energy, the excrement, is the material world that distracts us from our mission. And so, Chassidus says, the Baal Peor, they celebrated material pleasure. They said this is the ultimate experience of pleasure, which they felt to be a very divine energy. It is. It's very deep pleasure we feel from different things, touches on the core of ourselves. I feel fulfilled. But the fulfillment came from material fulfillment. And that was symbolically represented by them defecating in front of the idol. Now, of course, they didn't That wasn't their understanding of it, right? But the way Hasidic thought sort of in retrospect looks at it, says their behavior in front of the idol was a perfect representation of their ideology. Because they worshipped the excrement, they worshipped the material pleasure, the external world that we see. And they were missing the internal reality. They were missing the spirit of the world. That's what they were missing. And so if you think about it, we all often succumb to this idolatry of Baal Peor. We make decisions in our lives that we prioritize our material pleasure and comforts over moral values, over caring for others, and over spiritual goals. And what we're essentially saying is, I want the feces, I want the excrement instead of the nutrients, right? Because you don't have to be a very devout, faithful believer to think that sublime ideals are more worthy than base material ideals, right? Even to say with understanding a deep idea is a more fulfilling human experience than enjoying a drink with your friends. Yet, often when faced with the choice between the two, we're going to go out for drinks. So what we're doing is, I am succumbing, I'm saying, well, these pleasures make me feel better. So I am choosing the waste, those things that are just functions that are necessary in this world in order for us to achieve greater things, and I'm investing myself in them, not allowing myself to focus on what's really important, on the spirit, on the soul, on the deeper elements of reality of human existence even, right? As human beings. We're not animals. Our highest faculty is our intellect, intelligence. We can come up with deep ideas. That's realizing our human potential. If we invest ourselves in material pleasures, that's animalistic potential. Animals do the same thing. And so we're robbing ourselves of our deepest human spirit. This is what the Midianites and Moabites wanted to bring the Jews over to. Their real intention was they wanted to convert them, quote unquote, to Baal Peor. Which means, symbolically at least, they wanted the Jews to also forget God, forget the deep spiritual pursuits and engage in the material world. This was the exact opposite of what Bilaam prophesied. Bilaam was speaking about Achros Hayam, the end of days. Now, I said before, what is Mashiach? What is this Messianic era? A perfect world where we focus on what's important. We're all living lives dedicated to the Spirit, dedicated to helping others, lives where we're fulfilling our soulful pursuits, which is why there's no competition, no jealousy. Those will come from material pleasures and pursuits. I want what you have because it makes me feel good. But if I'm so confident in my own spiritual, if that's what I live by, I'm my own person, your own person. What jealousy is that I have? What competitions that I have? Why wars? Why shouldn't I share with you? Why should I poverty? So it's a life which is, we're all in worship of God, which means we all have this ultimate understanding of the divine in the world, which will lead us to live moral lives and spiritual lives. And that's what Bilaam foresaw for the Jewish people, looking at the Jews, and that's all he saw in them. He saw this incredible potential they have. They're going to give the world. Their contribution to the world is going to take thousands of years of work. But essentially, what we're meant to be, Or LaGoyim, a light to the nations, what it means is we are contributing to the world this idea, this message, that it's not about material gain, it's not about wealth, it's not about war, it's about something deeper, living for spiritual ideals. And eventually we'll have reached that, where every aspect of existence recognizes this. That's what all the mitzvahs are about. That's the Jewish mission. And when Bilaam saw the Jewish people camped there, that's what he saw in them. That's why he prophesied about that. He then told Balak, he says, you know what? I can't help but see this in the Jews. The only way we can get them is if we distract them from this ideal, from this mission. We have to influence them to the Baal Peor. Let them enjoy the waste, the materialism, indulge them in that. That will distract them from this mission. Then the Jewish mission will falter, will fail. And that's why, in follow-up to these prophecies about the Messianic era, that's why the option or the strategy was get them engaged in Baal Peor. So just to finish off, in an incredibly deep and beautiful Hasidic discourse, it's referred to as a mimer, the final discourse that the Rebbe published before he died, before he passed away in 1994. It's incredibly deep and about faith. But he says something interesting there, which is a theme he repeated many times. He said, if you look, there were Jews who spent decades under Soviet and communist rule in Russia that risked their lives day in, day out to uphold Judaism, to retain their own Judaism, to teach others, and they defied the Soviets, defied the communists, tooth and nail until their last breath. Many of those same people eventually came to America and quickly assimilated, lost their passion, their drive for Judaism. And they're asked, how's that possible? Under the most difficult conditions, they fought for this identity. Yet when it's given to them on a silver platter, in a world where we have freedom of religion, where they're accepted and welcomed as Jews, and the answer, of course, is very simple and profound. When you're challenged, when someone says you can't do this, it brings out a very deep side of you. How dare you deny me this right to be a Jew? And I fight for it. It's very important for me. But when no one's pushing me against that wall, of course my Judaism is important to me, but other things are also important. Making a good living is important. Having a good life, being comfortable. And you lose touch with that inner strength, inner core that you had, until once again you push to the wall. Right? There's no atheists in the foxholes. Because when you push that wall, something very deep comes out. But you're not pushed to it, you're on cruise control. And you get distracted by materialism, by comforts, by your own ego, by not even ego. I call it ego in a very subtle way. By your own, I want what's good for me. Selfishness. Yeah, but it's not even negative selfishness. It's sort of a neutral selfishness. Just that I am myself, and therefore my default status is to want what's good for me. So the Rebbe finished off and said, the challenge in a free America is a far greater and deeper challenge than in Soviet Russia, than Nazi Germany, than Spanish Inquisition. We have plenty of things we can point to in our historical map, right? All of those challenges were incredibly difficult, and many Jews stood up to those challenges and risked their lives and lost their lives for their faith. But it's very clear, being pushed against the wall for having this faith. The challenge of materialism, the challenge of an open world, open in front of you, the Rebbe says is a more subtle and deeper challenge, requires deeper strength and conviction as an individual to overcome. But it's the ultimate challenge that we need to pass through Mashiach. It's the final frontier. If we can remain committed Jews, if we can bring our message to the enlightened world, to the free world, then we'll have brought our message everywhere. If we can somehow turn around the materialistic culture of America and say, materialism, even there we can find God. That's not going to be a contradiction to sit at a barbecue with your steaks on July 4th and say a Dvar Torah and be a proud Jew. That's not going to be a contradiction to have a job on Wall Street and wear your yarmulke and have mezuzah on your office door. That it's not going to be a contradiction to leave the office for Shabbos despite all the calls coming in from your international business. That we can bring within this advanced, materialistic, open world we live in, if we can there bring the message, that is the ultimate expression of the Messianic ideal. That's going to bring Mashiach. Because if we can run away from it, hide from it, that's one level, right? But if we can embrace it and bring Mashiach there, that's what Bilaam was saying. I see these Jewish people, I see a Messianic vision. I see a vision of a world where they're living by the Spirit. But if we can bring that within the materialism, that is the ultimate. And so that's really the challenge that we have. We all face this challenge every single day in very overt ways and in very subtle ways as well. How much are we going to be distracted by the material world? Distracted by base desires and drives? Distracted by just, having a good time? This excrement? Or how much are we going to live by something deeper? An ideal, a spirit, a mission that's entrusted to us of the one God with multiple worlds. And if we truly live by that, then it's not a contradiction. We can still have our good lives. We can still live in a society of America. We can be good citizens here. We can enjoy the benefits and pleasures that come with this world we live in. But we're actually using those as tools to advance our mission, advance our message, as opposed to threats against it. And so, we'll end up for L'chaim as well. Start with L'chaim and with L'chaim. L'chaim, this was the Friedrich, the previous Rebbe, why he stood in prison. He had one mission in Soviet Russia, where he had to stand up against everything coming his way with such conviction and strength and courage for his Judaism and for the general public, for Jews to be proud of who they are, to remain strong in who they are, to educate themselves, educate other Jews. We have that same challenge in a very different way. There's no Soviet God pointing a gun in our head. But every single day, there are pleasures, there are experiences which are pointing a gun at our head and say, we've made many people talk. These pleasures are alluring us in. They're luring us in. They're saying, we've made many people succumb. And we have to know, yes, people who have multiple gods, it's about my own pleasure, I'm going to succumb to this. But if I am really proud of who I am as a Jew, as a monotheist, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, I believe in one God. I'm here for a purpose, for a mission. It may be very uncomfortable right now. I'm going to miss out on my party. I'm going to lose that experience. I'm not going to have the wealth and comfort which I could have had if I would throw away my moral compass. If I would throw away Shabbos, I could have much easier time finding food to eat, finding a date if I would throw away kosher. If I believe in one God, I'm not scared by this gun. You can't lure me in. You can't tempt me. I'm here for a purpose. Yes, it may be uncomfortable right now, but truth is, it's a much deeper pleasure. I'm actually going to experience my deepest human side, where I'm living for something greater. So L'chaim, we should have success in these challenges. We should live for something deeper, and through each one of us redeeming ourselves, we live in a messianic vision on our own. That's how we begin to bring the messianic ideal into the world at large. And so when we do our part, the world will change, and we'll hopefully create this reality with Mashiach. Amen.